Youki Iimori, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So I am so delighted to talk to you. I've not seen you in a long time, as we were just saying, and so it's good to connect.
Good to catch up.
Youki, your work is very different from the work of most other art lab artists. You're the only person I think we've had in art lab who works in the genre that you work in. How would you describe what you do?
It's a lot of, well, right now it's really scattershot, but a lot of the original inspiration comes from things like cartoons and like anime and manga, which are just Japanese cartoons and comics. But I'll be honest, it's been real scattershot. When I went to school for illustration, as you know, and so I ended up pulling in a lot of more realistic painting influence, and I've been kind of trying to find my way of like blending those two together.
Yeah,
and haven't quite hit it yet, but it's a weird mix of the two.
Do you feel like as an artist you're still searching for your idea, the expression that is you?
I'd say so. There's so many aspects of art and like different mediums and different forms of expression that I find interesting and enjoyable. And so I always find it hard to just choose a path and focus on it for a while.
I'm the same. When one has a lot of interests and passions, it's a gift, but it's also a challenge.
Yep. 100%.
So how did you wind up in illustration? What led you to pursue that you must have been good at drawing growing up or what?
So that's the funny thing is I was for a while. I definitely drew a lot when I was younger and wanted to pursue that a little bit more. And then I kind of hit a wall around, I'd say, like 4th, 5th grade, where at that point I was starting to see other kids in my class who were also good at drawing. And even against, all better judgment, against all advice, I started comparing myself to them.
Yeah.
And becoming less and less like confident and less. I enjoyed the process of making less because I wasn't as satisfied with my work.
Oh, that's really interesting. Did you go to an art school? Because you must have been surrounded by some kids who were pretty talented if you felt like you weren't matching up.
I mean, for some of them, I didn't go to an art school. I went to a like talented and gifted elementary/middle school.
Got it.
But that was mainly for academics and the more like reading, writing, science, math, not as much art.
Okay.
That was an elective. But I think it was just a lot of stubbornness, I think. I've since been diagnosed with ADHD as of like 2 or 3 years ago, but we didn't know that at the time. And obviously because it didn't come up until like I was 20, 22 years old.
Wow.
Clearly I was able to get by without that diagnosis.
Yeah.
But what it did mean was that I was very stubborn about not wanting to like take classes for art. I always wanted to just draw the way that I wanted to draw. I didn't want to have to like practice specific things. I didn't want to have to do learn shading or color theory or any of that. Because
it was just too difficult for you to focus in that way and just be disciplined?
I just didn't find it interesting.
I see, yeah.
In my head, I didn't really connect how A and B, I didn't connect how getting really good at drawing anatomy and like drawing realistic human figures would improve my ability as like a 10-year-old
right
to draw the cartoons that I liked drawing.
Right.
And so
it felt too removed and abstract.
Yeah. And so, that my parents didn't push it, which, I like looking back as an adult, part of me is like, I wonder what would have happened if they did. And then the other part of me is like, it probably was for the best because the worst case scenario would be that I just started hating art altogether.
Yeah.
But regardless, yeah, because of that, that kind of combined into a big snowball effect where for I'd say all of high school and the first year of college, I drew casually, but I didn't really I didn't really practice, and I had a very bitter relationship with art where it was something
Yeah.
that meant a lot to me and something that I wanted to be good at but never quite.
So obviously there was like part of you that must have felt like it wanted to express itself, but it was hitting your self-critical eye or something.
Basically, yeah. There's a lot of critical voices in my head um, now as well, but especially during high school years, as is the case, I think, for a lot of
Sure.
people, where,
Sure.
it's very easy when you're in your teenage years, you're discovering yourself. There's a
Yeah.
lot of self-criticism, but yeah, because of that self-criticism, I just didn't draw very much for very long. And
So
so
what was the kind of breakthrough point where you got through that and realized like, yeah, this is something I'm good at and I want to get really good at?
I don't think I ever did fully break through it, actually. Or I definitely broke through it in that I recognized that it was something that I couldn't keep avoiding
Yeah.
and have been working towards it ever since. But there's definitely I'm still struggling with that critical voice inside when when I'm starting to do a piece or a drawing or a painting that's really critical about the not feeling like I'm doing it or getting a result that I really want. But really, the what it came down to was my major was originally game design, which in my school was basically coding light. It was like computer science light for the first couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And I did enjoy that, actually. I obviously didn't end up doing it professionally, but coding is really cool. I enjoy computer science a lot. I think it's really interesting. But I realized that the amount of envy and jealousy that I felt towards anybody around me that happened to have even the
Ah,
slightest degree of artistic talent
yeah.
or artistic practice, obviously wasn't healthy and didn't make me feel good. And I kind of started to realize I was like, this is probably this is a recurring enough and a consistent enough feeling for me that I should probably try and self-evaluate as to what this means and why I'm feeling this
Wow,
way.
that's intense because that connects to your self-doubt when you were a kid as an
Yep.
illustrator. You felt like other kids are better than me. I'm not an illustrator, but just in other realms, I've had that. I've found that sometimes those negative emotions have spurred me in positive ways. Have you ever
Hmm.
found that?
I think, I mean, in the long run, yes, because that's what spurred me to change my major and start practicing. But I think only I think it's, hmm, what's the best way to put this? Definitely, I think is the short answer. But it kind of tying into what you were saying about not necessarily encouraging people to force themselves to feel it, I do
Right.
think it's important to, when you're feeling those feelings of frustration or jealousy or like inadequacy of towards yourself compared to the people around you,
Yeah.
that you make sure to try and stay aware that you're not you not allowing that to become something that you take out on the people around you, and
Right.
then even additionally that you make sure not to it's a really I think it's a really fine line of also not making it a bludgeon that you use against yourself.
Right.
You should, I think, yeah, I definitely agree that it can be really good motivation when you see somebody doing something that you really want to do or you want to get at the level that you want to get to, that's a peer, and be like, dang, I this sucks that they're getting there and I'm not. I want to be able to get there, and use
Right.
that as motivation.
Yeah.
But I think I think it's a really easy slope to go
It's
down of
true.
either becoming too critical of yourself
It's
which will make it
true.
even harder, or starting to like, if you don't realize that, then taking it out on them. But no,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's right. Then you become outward focused and motivated for the wrong reason. I'm remembering that one of the things that really spurred me initially into very, very deep Jewish learning and engagement as an adult was I had an experience where I was surrounded by people who were much more Jewishly knowledgeable than I. And it led to an embarrassing situation where I was exposed to somebody who didn't know what was going on in this particular Jewish ritual context at a Shabbat dinner. And I felt so much shame. I was like, that's never going to happen to me again. And it sent me on this journey of really intense Jewish learning. So, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
then you have a choice as to what do I do with that negative emotion.
Yeah.
Hold on. So, I want to talk about game design.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry, also, I want to put out there for people who, I'll put this in the show notes as well. But your visual work is so striking and enjoyable to look at. Will you just give us your website so people can go check it out?
Oh yeah, it's well, ironically, I'm in the process of soft rebranding it, but for the foreseeable future, it is going to be yillus.com, YIILLUS.com.
Okay, great. And you can see some of Yuki's work there as well, your old work and your current work. And it's very striking, but also when you see it, you're not surprised that this is a person who knows the world of gaming. If I'm not, I think that's fair to say. Tell me about game design, which you mentioned having studied before, and why that was, even though you didn't like go into that, why was that compelling to you, and how do you think that's informed the work that you do?
So yeah, it actually ended up being my minor, and admittedly, part of it was actually because it was a stopgap for me. It was a compromise between becoming an artist and doing something that I could both make more money doing, and also that, frankly put, because of that whole cycle that we had been talking about, there was no way that I was going to have a portfolio good enough to get into art school. Art colleges are notoriously very competitive.
Yeah.
I had never touched paint for my entire life. I'd only drawn. Like, there was no way I was going to be able to get into art school. Both, I didn't have the confidence to even apply, and even looking retroactively with kinder glasses, I would not have had a portfolio that would stand out at the time. So I really liked video games, as a lot of people that are in their teens end up doing. It was a way for me to play with friends. It was a way for me to get to explore different forms of storytelling, and just a medium of expression that I think is becoming more and more common. And it also just has a lot of really interesting moving pieces all together. It has it's such a big collaborative piece. It needs writers, it needs different artists.
You mean creating a game?
Creating a game, yeah. Yeah, you need writers, you need artists, you need people who know how to code, you need people even separate from the code who are able to do the actual design of levels, or else it won't be fun. There's so many different plates to spin and so many interesting knobs to turn.
Yeah.
That, I mean, to this day, I still enjoy doing it, and do it casually as a hobby sometimes.
Yeah.
It just ended up being that I ended up in that second year being like, oh no, I really want to focus down on this art aspect.
What is the fascination? I mean, I think I was, I'm like probably a generation older than you, and there are games that I love, I love Red Dead Redemption 2. But games there's still something generationally to me where I think it's not intuitive to me how much gaming has just become part of the normal diet of immediate intake. What is it about the world of gaming that's so appealing to people? And also, I'm interested in how the world of gaming has influenced your work as an artist, or maybe that's not accurate to say.
I mean, honestly, I think it hasn't been as much the games itself as much as the visual aesthetic of some of those games. Seeing like the concept art that went into designing some of these characters for a game I played a lot when I was a kid really stuck with me, of seeing like this character that you then took and put into motion and got to play as, seeing it laid out as a bunch of schematics for the character's gloves and like big mechanical weapons and like
Yeah.
turn around character was really like, it was really cool to me. And then later it became more of a practical, this industry hires a lot of artists kind of decision. But it's definitely impacted things. I do think some of it has actually been almost not negative, but it's hampered me a little bit. For the first few years, when I transferred majors and then went towards graduating, and after I graduated, I kept trying to. I was so focused on getting a job that I think it warped my style towards what I thought specific industries would want to see.
Right.
Which I think isn't inherently bad, but doesn't work for me, because that took all of the fun out of making the art in a way that does not mesh with how my brain works.
There's part of you that is the pure creative energy. And there's a part of you that's then thinking about how that artistic creation lands in the world around you and what people think of it. So did you overcome that sense of like the market anxiety and like what it means to just create for yourself?
No.
Right.
But I'm in the process of doing it. I'm in the process of trying to do it. Fundamentally, I think the current route that I'm going to that I have just started going down did what I'd kind of been dreading since I'd graduated, which was settling down into a full-time job that wasn't art related. Because before that, when I was in art lab, I was doing part-time after school teaching for a little after school art program.
Yeah.
And that was great, but it didn't pay the bills. And even when I transitioned to full-time, it didn't quite pay the bills there. So I've found a job that provides things like health insurance, which unfortunately is very important in America.
It matters.
It does. And my hope is that taking that pressure off of my art and that constant pressure of needing to have something that sells.
Yeah.
And remove, because really the common thread that I see for most artists that I respect, and not to say that it's absolutely necessary, because I think there are people who can just kind of force it, and I wish I knew how to do that. But the common thread is that you really need to focus on finding things that you enjoy to draw and that you enjoy doing, and then your ability to break into the industry or to become better known as an artist will follow. So right now my work, as you kind of mentioned, and as I mentioned a little bit, is very painterly and has a lot more of a still paint physical focus. But I do really enjoy the unique aspects that come with storytelling through comics, storytelling through animation.
Yes.
That I think I would probably explore a lot more if I had literally no ties, and I could use that coincidentally as a way to get my friends employed as well, for any of them who are struggling with that.
I love that. I love that you have there's an ethical dimension to this where you want to bring along the people who are in your life and elevate them. So can gaming be a form of art?
Oh, absolutely. How familiar are you with the Dada movement? So the Dadaist movement was a movement post-World War I, going into World War II, that was this absurdist art movement where I think, well, okay. They were against definitions enough that they would even push back against being called a movement until later.
Right.
They were very anti-definition. They were the movement itself had no defined art style. The entire idea was to push back on the ideas of what makes what is art and what art can be. I believe this was Dada anyways. The European Dada movement was partially based on the idea that if the like if our current systems and our current definitions are what created World War One and the all of the fallout from it, then we should abscond from those systems and we should not
Oh,
be
wow.
putting them on a pedestal anymore.
So it was like an inherently political movement in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And same, I think, it's the US movement, I'm sure, has some similar qualities to it because I think some of them were the same people. But the one that people will always see is Marcel Duchamp's Fountain, which is just a urinal.
Yep.
And that one, I think, long story short, he submitted a urinal to a modern art contest with a bunch of other abstract art to see if they would accept it. They didn't accept it. He then wrote a big think piece as to why it was stupid that this was where they drew the line. It, again, very abstract, very talking, very philosophical, and political.
There's to use contemporary language, there's like a meta dimension
Absolutely.
to Dadaism that hadn't really been present. Well, actually, I'm speaking out of ignorance, so maybe I'm wrong about
No, I think,
that explicitly like a movement about art itself that was part of the artistic world. Yeah.
Yep. But regardless, the point is, I think I am hard pressed to call anything not art.
Right.
You could basically take anything and sit down to me and say X thing is art, and I'd be like, yeah, sure.
Right.
Okay.
This podcast could be a form of art.
Yeah,
that's so interesting. Yeah.
I think if we're talking about art as a concept and not just the physical, I'm drawing a picture, I'm making a thing.
Yeah.
In the same way that movies can be art, but not every movie is a masterpiece. There's a big difference between watching anything from the Criterion Collection and watching Michael Bay's Transformers.
Right.
As fun as Michael Bay's Transformers may be.
I know exactly. God, that's so interesting. Yeah.
I think most people would probably, at least they would not call it high art.
Yeah.
And I think in the same way, there's a lot of video games where if we are narrowing down the definition of art to kind of what people tend to imagine as being very artsy or artistic, there are many video games that do fall into that category of they're trying to tell a very specific story. They're trying to impart a specific feeling, and they use the mechanics, they use the visuals, they use the writing all together to tell that story.
What is the difference between a game that has that kind of artistic dimension and one that's just sort of like, Donkey Kong or whatever?
I think for me personally, it would be the intent.
Yeah.
I think for me, the number one thing that sells is the artistic intent there. So even Donkey Kong, if depending on what the creators said and what their thoughts behind it were, I would happily consider art. But what I more think of is things like Candy Crush Saga, where I'm sure there's many people who, for them, they put their life's work into it and they feel that it's art. But it's also very deliberately designed in a way to suck as much money out of the people who play it as possible.
It's a point of commerce. But what you said, when you talk about the intent, it's so fascinating because when you walk into a urinal and you see a urinal, it's just a urinal. Mm-hmm. Then you see Duchamp's urinal, and then there's a think piece that talks about his intent behind it. And you're saying the fact that there's a thought behind it transforms the urinal into a work of art.
So So that is I think where a lot of the contemporary art movement did land, was that like that thought is what transforms it. And I do think for me that is a lot of it, but I also understand and do not blame people who feel like that is too loose of a definition.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I think the fact that people only ever hear the words, or like they only ever hear about contemporary art when they're either walking through a museum and somebody's trying to convince them that it's really genius, but
Right.
they don't have a little plaque explaining why it's interesting, or they hear this person's drawing of a circle on a big canvas just sold for $25 million. And
Totally.
when those are the only two things you hear, it makes perfect sense that you would think to yourself, "Wow, these are a bunch of scammers." But I
I
think there's a lot of really interesting stories and thoughts around contemporary art.
I think that's a really, really powerful insight. I think that's really, really true. Yeah. Yeah. The art market itself has made it so difficult to appreciate the power of art because it both overstates and understates simultaneously the power of some of these works.
Yeah.
When something sells for $30 million or whatever, you can't possibly appreciate it as just this is something that some person did to express some thought, and it's kind of as simple as that and as complex as that at the same
Exactly.
time.
I mean,
Interesting.
yeah. Famously, I know there's one piece that gets trotted out a lot when people are talking about it. That's this artist who's, I think, the piece is just a banana duct taped to a wall.
Yeah.
But if you actually read the thought process behind it, it is really interesting.
Right.
And kind of like what you were saying before, very metatextual.
Yeah.
Because if I recall correctly, from what little I looked into it, the artist was trying to make a point about how absurd it was that he's gotten to the point where he can do something like tape a banana to a wall,
Right.
and it will sell for millions.
Right.
Unfortunately, that is undercut by the fact that he then sold it for millions.
Right.
And
Yeah.
just a con man.
Yeah, yeah. The market itself becomes part of the artwork. If you would, at the risk of putting you on the spot, can you give me an example? Well, you were talking about Candy Crush.
Mm-hmm.
So is that an example of an art? Understanding it's subjective again.
Yeah.
In your mind, is that an example of a work of art or of just like a kind of baseline commerce? And then I also wanted you to give me an example of something you of a game you think is really a work of art.
I think this is a very played out answer, but there's a game called Undertale.
Okay.
That has, I mean, anybody who's listening that is familiar with games probably already knows what it is, probably has played it. But it was, if I recall correctly, completely made just by one guy, Toby Fox. He did all of the music for it. He did all of the pictures for it. He coded it all himself in somebody else's basement. And it's a very short game. I think it's like 5-6 hours in total to play through the whole thing. And it's just a very succinct, delightful piece of storytelling.
Beautiful.
It's got a lot of metatextual elements to it. The music is really well done.
Yeah.
The characters are really easy to get attached to and to fall in love with. It's become kind of a mainstay of the genre for a reason. And
fascinating.
Yeah, I don't think people would push back very hard who have played it, who would say that it's not art.
So for you, at least with regard to gaming, it has to have a story or something transportive. Is that accurate?
I think not necessarily. It goes back to artistic intent. Did the creator have a strong, interesting intent?
I see.
Really, as I said, I was the worst person that you could ask this question to, because I am so open to being convinced about anything. If somebody emailed me and said, I have a 5-page paper to convince you why Candy Crush is art, I would at the very least entertain.
So Youki, I want to turn the page a little bit and ask you, do you think your Jewish upbringing or your Jewish identity informs your work as an artist, or is that not part of your artistic path?
I think the The things that really stick with me about Judaism and about my Jewish upbringing aren't like as much visuals or as much specific like symbology as much as it is concepts.
Hmm.
And so these are things that have kind of burrowed their way deep into me and wouldn't come out as much in some like as blatantly or as transparently in just a singular painting, but I think would definitely become more noticeable in if I was trying to tell a story or explore concepts. I think it would the concepts that are enforced through a Jewish upbringing would become a lot more clear.
That's so fascinating, because I do think sometimes, like, when I read a Jewish text, like a midrash, which is,
Mhm.
for those listening who don't know, a midrash is an ancient form of biblical interpretation and exegesis, and that sometimes results in like very fantastical stories and reimaginings of scenarios from the Torah. If I'm reading a story, I can summon up like an almost cinematic vision of what the story looked like. But other people, it's so text oriented that I have sometimes felt like there's a huge opportunity for a visual representation of so much of the ancient Jewish tradition. Like if it
Mhm.
were put into a pictorial form, and some people have done this. I just think it could be such a rich way for other people to access these stories.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's not that the like those images aren't there.
Yeah.
I think it's just not they aren't things that I explore in my work as much.
Right, but you're thinking down the road, it could be a path that you would explore as you delve into sequential work.
The A lot of the things that I take from Judaism, I think, are things that end up lending themselves more to abstraction.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that is a really fascinating thing. So first of all, there is a misapprehension that the Jewish tradition totally prohibits the depiction of the human form. And there's a
Mhm.
whole scholarly discussion about this, about which I'm not very well educated, but I do know enough to know that it's not at all obvious that there ought to be, that properly understood. I just want to mention to you and to our listeners, I wish I could remember the name of the artists, but I do want to recommend to you, Youki, because it might interest you, that there's at least two artists who have done an illustrated version, like a graphic novel version
Mhm.
of Pirkei Avot, which is a section of the Mishnah it's essentially like an early expression of Jewish wisdom literature. There's sort of like
Mhm.
short, pithy sayings and articulations of like basic Jewish values. And a couple of artists have put into graphic novel form a discuss, this like two rabbis discussing a certain principle or point. So tell us a little bit about your Jewish upbringing and what was the path that kind of led you to get into art lab, and how did that happen?
I mean, I think I would generally consider myself a quote unquote not good Jew
I hate that term, but I know exactly what you mean.
in that I was raised, I'd say, semi-orthodox. My mom was raised completely not orthodox. My dad was Christian. Um, but my mom was Jewish and she wanted to be a little bit more orthodox on the orthodox side and tried to raise me that way. So I grew up, I'd say, probably until the age of like, honestly, 10 or 11, pretty, like, generally pretty orthodox. Not quite to the point of doing things like saying daily prayers or things like that, but being very careful about like following the rules of on Shabbat, keeping completely kosher, separate sets of plates for everything.
So wait, your dad was not Jewish, but
Nope.
your household was Jewish,
Yep.
Jewishly observant.
But that started to kind of whittle down over time because when like I went to Hebrew school for a little bit to make sure so I was able to read Hebrew. I went to synagogue every week. And I think the main things that kind of ended up whittling it down were the being surrounded by kids who aren't Jewish and not really getting very personally like satisfying explanations as to why some of these rules should be followed. And then also, unfortunately, just the constant rush of how life has continued to spiral and how everything in the world has gotten faster and faster and faster, where
Yep.
it's really difficult to be able to fully unplug from everything on Saturdays.
Yeah.
And, like, not use any electricity, not have any contact with everybody, just because whether it's like, oh, I don't have the option of not going to work that day because I have
Yeah.
like a weird offset schedule, or oh, this is like, I'm not going to be able to socialize with my friends otherwise. There's a lot of barriers, I think, that can make that difficult.
Okay.
And especially as a young teen, that kind of also, like, that kind of ended up eroding away for my mom. And she let me be a little bit less observant. I still went to synagogue, still did like NCSY and things like that, and did enjoy them. But I, I don't know. But I, I don't think I ever really felt the strong connection to Judaism that a lot of people did. Which, and like, even even when I did my bar mitzvah, I think there was a part of me that did it because I knew I was like, I feel like I'll regret it if I don't do it,
Right.
but
It
not
wasn't it
necessarily.
wasn't necessarily like I have to do this. I love this. It was like it
Exactly.
was a step removed. Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
Which is funny because in retrospect, I think I do wish I'd done more for my bar mitzvah. I didn't end up reading the full portion. I just read like the bare minimum that you're able to. And yeah, so funnily enough, it wasn't, I think, going to college strengthened my bond with Judaism, but also completely eroded away at most of the like stricter
Yeah.
teachings of it because
Fascinating.
my mom was very transparent with me. She was like, when you're not in my house, you can do whatever you want. Like, you've
Right.
turned 18, you're off at college. I don't care.
Right.
Do whatever you want. And which, for 18-year-old me was very exciting. But I think like despite never feeling that strong connection with Judaism as a faith, it was like it's still very important to me and always was very important to
Right.
me to keep like it was still how I was raised, and I never stopped being like I am Jewish. It's like it's
Part of
not
who you
something I want
are.
to throw away either.
What was it about Art Lab that called on you? It's, it sounds like you were a person who became not very observant, but your Jewishness was important to you. Why reach out to a program that was Jewish and artistic? What did that hold for you?
Well, I was a little lost post graduating. I was, well, I guess to a degree still am, but I was trying to find anything that would allow me to do art, to like add to my ability to pay my student debt, which Art Lab did, and
I love that.
like
Good.
get out of the house
Yeah.
and network and meet people and like
Yeah.
gain experiences because I
Yeah.
am I can recognize that I am a bit of a homebody to a fault. Art tends to be
Me
insular in
too.
nature,
Yeah.
and I was like, this is a great way for me to go out and like meet my community, meet people that are like-minded, do something interesting, and like learn more about Judaism and do some art things. And it's not like a huge time commitment. This seems interesting.
Yeah.
And so I applied for Art Lab and I got in, and
Yeah. Well, it was so great to have you in the
great to be there.
yeah, to have you in the cohort and to have your artistic sensibility and the kind of work you do was was not the normal kind of stuff that we see. And it was very visually exciting stuff. I really encourage people to go to your website. So, Youki, I've so loved this. It's been so fun to talk to you. We need to wrap up, and I just want to wrap up with these two final questions and ask you just anything you want to share with folks that you are into, that you love right now, that you want to let people know about.
Yeah, I think two things as a medium. I think it tends to get people tend to pigeonhole it into Pixar movies.
Right.
Not to shit on Pixar movies, but
right.
Pixar movies and like things for kids. There's plenty of animation that is really beautiful and tells really gorgeous stories that is worth exploring out there. Some of which is for kids, some of which is not, but I highly recommend that people at least give it a shot.
Give us a title. Give us the title.
Oh, okay. If we're looking at specific title, Mitchells versus the Machines.
Mitchells versus the Machines.
Yeah, the Mitchells versus the Machines. I found to be. It's on Netflix. It is
Fabulous.
a family movie, and it was just a very heartfelt movie to watch with a lot of fun animation.
Okay, great.
I think it tends to be for people who aren't already actively looking for it. People tend to kind of write it off as it's either children's animation or Family Guy, and there's a lot of stuff in there that can be like really great to explore with really interesting stories, and there's just so much room that animation lends to interesting storytelling that I really recommend. And then the other is just contemporary art, as we kind of talked about a little bit. I highly recommend people give it a second shot, not necessarily like paying to go into a museum, but even just if you see a piece that you see a lot of people talking about how ridiculous it is, take a second to research what the backstory is. I think a lot of the time, if you can separate the absurd prices some of these are selling for, and yes, I will admit, I think some of them are genuinely just money laundering schemes.
Yeah.
And I won't pretend like they're not, but some of them have really interesting thoughts and stories behind them that are really fun to read.
Do you have a favorite contemporary artist who you feel, or favorite name that you feel like people might have heard about the ridiculous prices, but you feel like there's really something there?
One that I wouldn't say is my favorite, but I think he's both well known and Barnett Newman.
Barnett Newman.
Yeah, his most well known piece that people have probably heard of is Who's Afraid of Red, Yellow, and Blue.
I love that so much. Okay, and then what is the best Jewish food?
It's a really basic answer, but I think I've got to go with either matzo balls or bagels.
Absolutely.
We really hit it out of the park with matzo balls and bagels and lox and cream cheese.
Yeah, it's true.
Phenomenal breakfast food.
It can't be true. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing to not love about bagels that are served well, lightly toasted in my vision, lightly toasted with cream cheese and lox.
100%.
You can't go wrong. Youki Iimori. Youki, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Take care, man. Yep. Be well.